Let my voice proclaim the tender mercies of my Lord. Yeshua is his name. El Shaddai, El Shaddai, El Elyon Adonai. Age to age you're still the same, by the power of the name. You saved the son of Abraham through the power of your hand. Turned the sea into dry land. To the outcast on your knees, you were the God who receives. And by your might you set your children free. El Shaddai, El Shaddai, El Elyon Adonai. Age to age you're still the same, by the power of the name. El Shaddai, El Shaddai, Adonai. We will praise and lift you high, El Shaddai. Through the years you made it clear that Yeshua's time was near. Though the world could not see what Messiah ought to be, though your word contained the plan, they just could not understand. Your most awesome work was done through the frailty of your Son. El Shaddai, El Shaddai, El Elyon Adonai. Age to age. Shaddai, Erkamkana Adonai. We will praise and lift you high, El Shaddai. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Shabbat Shalom. Good to see you all. Thanks for coming.
Good evening, Shabbat Shalom. Chagim, Chag Sameach. You know, technically it was last week. We haven't celebrated yet here at our synagogue because that's why it says Purim. You know, literally it was yesterday. But you know, things with the time change and everything, you know, it's a little mushy up. Anyway, we are planning on having a very, very fun Purim play tomorrow night with a cast of thousands, okay, a cast of dozens, and it's all coming together. You know, there's a certain thing about theaters, you know, it's a panic until you finally, the day of the show, and then everything comes together. Sort of like a good, I don't know, soup. Yeah, so we'll be soupy. But we hope you can come because we'll have fun doing it. And we'll just laugh at ourselves, but it's a lot more fun when we have audience participation. You'll be surprised by several. I hope pleasantly surprised. So anyway, it's, you know, Purim is like God's anything can happen day. Honestly. I'm going to now ask you, sort of in a tangential way, how old you are by asking you, how many of you remember the original Mickey Mouse?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Many people. I really, seriously, I was like 5 years old, but I remember it. And they used to have, I don't remember what day it was, Anything Can Happen Day. And one of the days was Music Day, and the other days. Anything Can Happen Day. And I always think Purim is that day. It was like potpourri in Jeopardy terms. You can get a question about anything, and that's what Purim is. So there's a lot of metaphors that work at Purim time. All right, so don't forget that's tomorrow night. The potluck is at 6. You're welcome to come if you just want to come for the show. I don't know what time it will start, 7:15, 7:30. But it's going to be, and it'll be in the grand ballroom. If you're coming for dinner and you have questions, ask around and people will tell you what you should do. Now, on the opposite, don't throw this away after tomorrow, on the opposite side are 2 special things that we're doing for Passover. Number 1, which is the announcement is now out on our public billboard out there. Passover begins at sundown on Friday, April 9th. You might recognize it also as 19th, sorry. I was just going to say Good Friday. Whenever Good Friday is, that's when you should have it. The synagogue will be closed that evening because traditionally Jewish people have their family. First night Seder is one of the most important nights, if not the most important night, and so that will be closed for that, but you should be having worship at your own home with a bunch of people. Yes. Oh, I don't think I have a bunch of people who say, because I don't know what I'm going to do, and I don't know why I'm doing it. Well, lucky for you, we're going to have a couple of sessions to help you with those things. Saturday, March 30th, I believe that's next Saturday, 1 p.m., I'm going to be leading, I'd say about an hour and 15 minutes seminar about the basic questions of what is leavening? Why must we get rid of it? Who thought this up? Why did they think this was a good idea? And we'll talk about that, and we might even mention biochemical topics. It'll be exciting. So also, I have a very, very nice video. It's about 20 minutes long, but I think you'll appreciate the video. And that's not of me, it's professionally done. And they used to show it on PBS, so you'll enjoy that too. And have questions answered, and, you know, just generally be enlightened. And then 2 weeks from then, because we'll be gone that middle week, Saturday, April 13th, John will be leading you through page by page the Haggadah, explaining to you what you could say on that page if you needed to say something, what certain things mean, and also comparing and contrasting with the Last Supper that Yeshua and his disciples spent together, and telling you what the Second Temple ways were doing Passover then. So that would be that day. Once again, you don't have to buy fancy schmancy booklets for Passover. You don't have to buy the Haggadot. You can get them for free at many, many grocery type stores. Do not ask the lovely person in the aisle who's stocking the shelves. They won't know anything about that. Please go to the manager, the information desk, and say, did you get booklets for Passover? Because if you go to, Timmy in the aisle, Timmy won't know what you're talking about. He'll just say no. But go to the right people, and then they can tell you. Because they have a look on their face like, oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. You know, you can only get these tips here. You can only get these kinds of practical, down-to-earth, how I get what I want tips right here. And we're not charging you anything for it. So we're not charging you anything yet. Number 4. 4 means you have to laugh at all of our jokes. Where's John? That's a deal. 4 means you must laugh at every stupid joke that John or I or anyone else standing up here makes. It's a law. What else can I tell you? We still need your tithes and offerings and whatever money you can give us. It goes in the blue boxes back there. We do not take an offering. We do not pass a plate at a Shabbat service. You need to be adult enough to recognize that the blue boxes are telling you that they are empty and need money. We just had a council meeting. We went over what we've spent money on just since January. And you know, it's just like your house. You're spending money, you don't know where it's coming from, but you know you have to have it because otherwise things go wrong. Do you have a category? Things go wrong fund. That's our things go wrong fund, and we need some more money for it when things go wrong. Don't forget, if you're leaving out that door after the service, like you have the Aaronic benediction, everybody moves into the grand ballroom for refreshments, and if you want to go out that door, make sure it locks behind you. That means if you go out and you hear it go donk, that's not it. If it locks, it's pretty quiet. But if you hear a big donk, go back and follow the directions. Because that's all my job. All right. Well, as I said, anything can happen day. That's good because sometimes I feel like the past 5 years have been anything can happen years. I don't know. That's the way I feel about it sometimes. But here's what we know. No matter if we can't necessarily predict what's going to happen tomorrow or next week or next year or next decade, we know the God that we serve. We serve the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He's with us no matter what we go through in life. And He's faithful to us. We should strive to be faithful to Him and worship Him, thank Him whenever we can. Thanks for coming tonight. Shabbat Shalom.
Shalom.
As we begin our service this evening, we turn to pages 142 to 145 in our Siddur. It is Mola Yom HaShabbat, one of the traditional sounds. You're welcome.
Your faithfulness to the music of the 10-string lyre and the melody of the harp. For you make me glad by your deeds, O Lord. I sing for joy of the works of your hands. How great are your works, O Lord. How profound are your thoughts. The senseless man does not know. Fools do not understand that though the wicked spring up like grass, and all evildoers flourish, They will be forever destroyed. But you, O Lord, are exalted forever. For surely your enemies, O Lord, surely your enemies will perish. All evildoers will be scattered. You have exalted my horn like that of a wild ox. Fine oils have been poured upon me. My eyes have seen the defeat of my adversaries. My ears have heard the rout of my wicked foes. The righteous will flourish like a palm tree. They will grow like a cedar of Lebanon. Planted in the house of the Lord, they will flourish in the courts of our God. They will still bear fruit in old age. They will stay fresh and green, proclaiming, the Lord is upright. He is my rock, and there is no wickedness in him.
I take you left, a brief shop portion, top of pages 136 and 137, carries along that theme a little further. As now each of us as individuals in the company of the whole community or congregation speak out and say, I praise the Lord, because I've seen what he's done for me. He's performed mighty deeds with his arm, and he has brought down those who have brought down rulers, and has lifted up the humble. And so now we respond. I'll lead you in the opening line in Hebrew and ask that you respond with the whole of English. Romama nafshi et Adonai v'tagel ruchi ve'elohei yishi. Together.
My soul praises the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God my Savior, for he has been mindful of the humble state of his servant. From now on all generations will call me blessed, for the Mighty One has done great things for me. Holy is his name. His mercy extends to those who fear him from generation to generation. He has performed mighty deeds with his arm. He has scattered those who are proud in their inmost thoughts. He has brought down rulers from their thrones, but has lifted up the humble. He has filled the hungry with good things, but he has sent the rich away empty. He has helped his servant Israel, remembering to be merciful to Abraham and his descendants forever, even as he said to our fathers.
And that too is part of Purim. He has helped his servant Israel, remembering to be merciful. It's part of what we are reminded of. Pages 10 to 13 is where we turn next. We're reminded, not only on this day, but literally on a daily basis, that the God whom we serve is truly the shield of our ancestors. And so Richard will begin, and then we will respond on page 13. As he was a shield to our ancestors, so also we can count on him being a shield to us as well.
Magen avod bidavaro, mechaye metim b'mamaro, el hakadosh she'en kamohu, amediach le'amo, beyom Shabbat kadesho. Kivam ratza lahadiach lahem, V'fanev na'avod be'yira v'afachad, v'nodeh ishmo b'chol yom. Tamid me'en habarachot, el ha'hodaot, Adon ha'shalom, mekadesh ha'shabbat, u'mvarech shavi'i, u'maniach kedusha, le'amne lushneoneg, zecher, l'maaseh v'reshit, zecher, l'maaseh v'reshit. With his word he was a shield to our fathers. By his decree he will give life to the dead. The holy God, with whom no other can compare, who provides his people rest each holy Sabbath day. In reverence and awe we will serve him daily, and every day we will thank him suitably. He is the God to whom all thanks are due, the Lord of peace, who makes the Sabbath special. He blesses the seventh day for his people, to give them joy and remind them of creation.
He makes the Sabbath day special. Shabbat is in fact special because it is the guarantee that he is the shield for us as he was for our ancestors. He committed himself to being that and doing that for us. And so as we light the Shabbat rice, this evening we are reminded that he guarantees not only his relationship with us, but his protection of us.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvoto v'tzivanu l'hadlik ner shel Shabbat. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who commanded us to light the candles for the Sabbath. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvoto v'tzivanu l'hidot or l'goyim, v'natan lanu Yeshua Mashiachenu ha'or la'olam. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who sanctified us by your commandments and commanded us to be a light for the nations, and gave us Yeshua our Messiah, the light of the world. Shabbat Shalom.
The one who stands behind that guarantee that Shabbat is in fact the one who sits enthroned in the heavenly realms, as the rabbis of old envisioned the Messiah would be. Having provided for us atonement, he now provides us with certainty. We respond, therefore, in pages 40 and 41 as we enter that throne room scene. And we respond with Elohim Asher, pages 40 and 41.
Elohim Asher diber, mikadem pe'amim rabot, ubirakim rabot el ha'avot beyad ha'nevi'im, diber aleinu be'achari hayamim ha'ele, beyad ha'bein asher, sam yeyoresh ol, Gamasa et ha'olamim, uzohar kevodo, b'tzelem atzmuto, v'nosei kol bidvaro, ra'havora, u'lecha she'asa, tibur chatahim, yashav limin, ha'gdula. In the past, God spoke to our fathers through the prophets, and many times in various ways. But now, in the end of days, he has spoken to us by the Messiah, his Son, whom he appointed the heir of all things, and through whom he made the universe. The Son is the full radiance of God's glory, and the flawless manifestation of his reality. He sustains all things by his powerful word. After he made atonement for sins, he sat down in the place of authority beside the majesty in heaven. True and firm, established and lasting, right and faithful, loved and treasured, desired and pleasant, feared and mighty, ordered and acceptable, good and beautiful is this word to us forever and ever.
He sits there awaiting his return. We are in the presence of the God of the universe, expecting that return, as the words of Kaddish remind us. Sephardi Kaddish, pages 156 and 157, remind us that we are anticipating, as we praise our God, that we will get to see the return of the Messiah.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמר הבא. והלמד יברכירותי וימליך מלכותי ויצמח פורקני וקרב משכי וחייקון וביום יקון ובחיי לכל בית ישראל ועגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם עולם לעולמיה יתברך. יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם עולם לעולמיה יתברך. וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתהלל ויתהלל שמי לקודשה בריחו לאלה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונקמתה לאמרן בעלמא ואמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיא וחיים טובים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו amen. Glorified and sanctified be his great name in the world which is created according to his will. May he bring about the reign of his kingdom and cause his salvation to sprout and bring near his Messiah in your lifetime and in your days and in the life of all the house of Israel, speedily, yes, soon, and say, Amen. May his great name be blessed forever and forever, eternally. Blessed and praised, glorified and exalted, extolled and honored, adored and lauded be the name of the Holy One, blessed be he, who is high above, far above all blessings and hymns and praises and consolations which are spoken in the world, and say, Amen. May there be great peace from heaven and good life for us and for all Israel, and say, Amen. He who makes peace in the heavenly realms, may he make peace for us and for all Israel, and say, Amen.
We reflected on the fact that the God in whose presence we find ourselves is the one who is high above, far above all blessings and hymns and praises and consolations that we have brought before him, offered to him as part of our gratitude and worship. And it's that which helps us better understand. As we stand now and turn to pages 88 and 89, we understand the impact of the words, Ein Elohim, truly there is none like you, the Lord among the gods, glorious in holiness, awesome in grace, and doing wonders. That becomes the core of our response now as Richard leads and we respond with him.
Ein Kamocha ve'Elohim Adonai, ve'ein kama'asecha. Malchut HaMalchut kol olamim, u'memshalcha bechol dor, bechol dor Adonai Melech, Adonai Malach, Adonai Imelok Le'olam Va'ed, Adonai Oz Ve'lo Yitein, Adonai Yivarek et Amo V'Shalom. There is none like you among the gods, my Lord, and there is nothing that compares to your deeds. Your kingdom is a kingdom that endures for all eternity, and your sovereignty extends throughout all generations. The Lord reigns, the Lord has reigned, the Lord shall reign throughout eternity. The Lord will bless his people with peace.
Now as we turn and face Jerusalem, the direction of the ark, we build on what we have just responded with. We said the Lord should reign. We now affirm that we want the Lord to reign in our lives, each and every one of us personally. That, in effect, is the core of the Shema and its response on pages 34 to 39.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem, Kevod Malachuto, Leolam Vaed. Ve'ata et Adonai Elohecha, bechol dacham ubechol nafshecha ubechol me'odecha. Ve'hayu ha'advarim ha'ele, asher Elohim etzavka hayom alecha. V'shinantam levanecha, v'dibartam, v'shivtecha lebetecha, uvetecha b'derech, uv'shakacha u'nomecha, uv'shaktam leot al yadecha, ve'hayu letotafot me'einecha, uv'shaktam al mezuzot betecha, uv'yisharecha. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. Blessed be he whose glorious kingdom is eternal. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your life, and with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as reminders on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the door frames of your houses and on your gates.
We turn now to the immediate portions for this evening, paragraphs 6 and 7, including the Purim edition, down on pages 76 to 79. These particular paragraphs remind us again that the God whom we serve, the God whom we respond to in gratitude and in worship. As we begin, we say, we thank you, O Lord. You are our ancestors, God. You are our rock, the shield that saves through every generation. Continuing on the theme with which we began, we now respond in quiet, utilizing these words, each of us, to respond personally to our God. And do remember that Purim editions. So we thank you for the miracles, the redemption, the great power, the deeds, and for the battles which you did for our ancestors in those days at this time. Specifically in the days of Mordecai and Esther in Shushan the capital, when wicked Haman was among them, when he sought to destroy, murder, and eliminate all the Jews, from the young to the old, infants and women in one day on the 13th of the 12th month, the month of Adar. And their wealth to plunder was his desire as well. But you in great mercy frustrated his counsel. You ruined his scheme. You made his mischief to return upon his own head. And so all the living shall thank you and praise your name faithfully, because you are, as you demonstrated, the God of salvation and deliverance. Blessed are you, O Lord, you are the God whose name is good, and to whom it is pleasant to give thanks. Vahi Ben Soa reminds us on pages 88 and 89 that he's also the God who will, at that time in the future, be the one whom the world serves, because in the words of the nations and their leaders, Vahi Ben Soa reminds us that they have requested that they will be able to go up to the mountain of Zion to worship the God of Jacob. And we reflect on that as we now respond. Pages 88 and 89.
Vahi ben Aharon vayomer Moshe Kuma Adonai vayafutzu v'akav yanusu Nesanecha mipanecha Ki mitzion teisei Torah Ki mitzion teisei Torah Udavar Adonai Yerushalayim Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah Le'amo Yisrael Kedushato. And it came to pass, whenever the ark went forward, Moses would say, Arise, O Lord, and let your enemies be scattered. May those who hate you flee from before you.
For from Zion shall go forth the Torah, and the word of the Lord out of Jerusalem.
Blessed be he who in holiness gave the Torah
to his people Israel.
Having received the Torah, his people Israel respond along with those who have joined them in gratitude and in commitment. On page 133.
The ark now unveils its treasure.
To our eyes and minds and hearts.
Inside, the scroll of Torah stands.
It stands there with all its richness and wisdom.
As we listen, voices speak, voices of our ancestors.
Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Joseph, and Moses.
O God, they bring us your instructions for us.
Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, and Miriam speak to us as well.
O God, they move us to respond to your promises to us.
We are grateful for your words, the words of Torah.
Hear, O Israel, the Lord calls.
We will hear your words that we may learn them, love them, live them.
What does the Lord require of you? To fear him, love him, serve him, and walk in all his ways.
All the Lord has said, we will do.
Yehi Shebarach Avotenu Abraham Yitzchak v'Yaakov, he who blessed our fathers Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Rabbi John. May he bless Matthew. May he bless Janice. And may he bless Mike, who have come up to honor God and the Torah. May the Holy One bless them and their families, and send blessing and prosperity on all the work of their hands. Baruch Adonai HaMavorach.
Baruch Adonai HaMavorach Leolam Vaed.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam, Asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'Torah.
Amen.
Bless the Lord who is blessed.
Bless the Lord who is blessed forever and ever.
Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who chose us from all peoples and gave us the Torah. Blessed are you, Lord, giver of the
Vadaber Adonai Moshe Lemor, Tzav et Ha'aharon ve'et benav Lemor, Zot Torat Ha'olah, Hi Ha'olah al Mochda, Al Mizbeach Kol Halayla Ad Haboker, Ve'esh HaMizbeach Tukad Bo. You may be seated. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, charge or instruct Aaron and his sons in the following manner, or say. This is the guideline or the regulation, the instruction with respect to the burnt or elevation offering. It is an elevation offering that is to be on the flame which is upon the altar. It is to be there all night until the morning. And the fire of the altar will burn in it. And so begin the instructions for the burnt offering, the elevation offering, the offering that as we present ourselves to God, we get elevated. And as we present these kinds of offerings to Him, it only encourages and enriches us. Enough for now.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torat emet, v'chayei olam nata b'tocheinu. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'Torah.
Amen.
Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who gave us the Torah of truth and life everlasting planted in our midst. Blessed are you, Lord, giver of the Torah.
Now all you Hebrew Blast-Off students and students of Hebrew, take out your bulletins, the first inside page, and follow along to prove that you can follow along and to make sure I read this thing correctly. Are you ready? As you found it on the bottom of the page, Vadaber Adonai El Moshe Lemor, Tzav et Ha'aharon ve'et benav Lemor, Zot Torat Ha'olah, Hi Ha'olah al Mochda. I almost made a mistake, right? Al HaMizbeach Kol Halayla Ad HaBoker Ve'esh HaMizbeach Tukad Bo. Follow along? Did I get it right? Good. Don't forget, your classes start up again on Sunday. We read these words not just for the fun of it or for their enrichment, but because we read them because we understand that they've come directly from God, and that's the acknowledgement we now make as we turn to pages 98 and 99 for V'zot HaTorah. If you need a transliteration, that's page 95. We will stand before him as our ancestors stood before him when we first received these words. So in a sense, we are saying we receive these words as well directly from Sinai because they come directly from God through the hand of Moses. Pages 98, 99, transliteration, page 95, as we respond.
וזאת התורה אשר שם משה לפני בני ישראל על פי אדוני ביד משה.
This is the Torah which
Moses faced before the children of Israel. It is in accord with the Lord's command by the hand of Moses.
You may be seated. Now, at Purim, it is tradition, it's our responsibility to read from the Megillah. If we're really good and had a lot of time, you'll see the Megillah in the corner of the ark. We read that whole thing, but we're only going to read the end of the story, just so you know that it ends on a good note. There are blessings before and after. The blessings are not in your Siddur, they're in the Matzor, and the Matzors are on that back bookcase. I'm not going to ask you to go rush after them, but I'm going to ask that you just listen carefully to Richard as he leads us in the blessings.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kedeshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu hamikra Megillah. Deserving of praise are you, O Lord our God, ruler over the universe, who hallowed us by your commandments and instructed us concerning the reading of the Megillah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asa nisim la'avoteinu b'yamim hahem b'zaman hazeh. Deserving of praise are you, O Lord our God, ruler over the universe, who miraculously delivered our fathers in days of old at this season. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'achiyanu v'kiyamanu v'higiyanu b'zaman hazeh. Amen. Deserving of praise are you, O Lord our God, ruler over the universe, who kept us alive and sustained us and privileged us to reach this season.
By the way, you will get to hear the end of the story, but I thought it might also be good for you to hear part of the beginning of the story as well. So we'll start there.
Okay, I'll be reading from Esther, chapter 2, verses 5 to 10, and then 19 through 23. There was in Shushan, the capital, a man who was a Jew, whose name was Mordecai, the son of Yair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjamite. He had been exiled from Jerusalem with the captives exiled with Jehoiakim, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had carried off. He had raised Hadassah, that is, Esther, his uncle's daughter, because she had neither father nor mother. The girl was shapely and good-looking. After her father's and mother's death, Mordecai had adopted her as his own daughter. When the king's order and decree were proclaimed, and many girls assembled in Shushan, the capital, under the care of Hegai, Esther too was taken into the king's house and put under the care of Hegai, who was in charge of the women. The girl pleased him and won his favor, so that he lost no time in giving her her cosmetics, her portions of special food, and 7 girls from the king's palace to attend to her. He also promoted her, and the girls attending to her to the best place in the harem's corridors. Esther did not disclose her people or family ties, because Mordecai had instructed her not to tell anyone. When the girls would gather on other occasions, Mordecai would sit at the king's gate. Esther had not yet revealed her family ties or her people, as Mordecai had ordered her. For Esther continued obeying what Mordecai had told her to do, as she had when he was raising her. On one of those occasions, when Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, two of the king's officers, Bigdan and Teresh, from the group in charge of the private entryways, became angry and conspired to assassinate King Ahasuerus. But Mordecai learned about it and told Esther the queen. Esther reported it to the king, crediting Mordecai. The matter was investigated, found to be true, and both were hanged on a stake. All this was recorded in the daily journal that was kept with the king.
I will be reading from Esther, chapter 9, verses 20 to 28. Mordecai recorded these events and sent letters to all the Jews in the provinces of King Ahasuerus, both near and far, instructing them to observe the 14th day of the month of Adar and the 15th day every year, to commemorate the days in which the Jews obtained rest from their enemies, and the month which for them was turned from sorrow into gladness, and from mourning into a holiday. It would make them days of celebrating and rejoicing, sending portions of food to each other and giving gifts to the poor. So the Jews took it upon themselves to continue what they had already begun to do, and as Mordecai had written to them, because Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the enemy of the Jews, had plotted against the Jews to destroy them, and had thrown that is, cast lots, to crush and destroy them. But when Esther came before the king, he ordered by letters that Haman's wicked scheme, which he had plotted against the Jews, should recoil on his own head, and that he and his sons should be hanged on the gallows. This is why these days have been called Purim, after the word Pur. Thus, because of everything written in this letter, and what they had seen concerning this matter, and what had come upon them, the Jews resolved and took upon themselves, their descendants, and all who might join them, that without fail they would observe these 2 days in accordance with what was written in this letter, and at the appointed time every year, and that these days would be remembered and observed throughout every generation, every family, every province, and every city, and that these days of Purim would never cease among the Jews, or their memory be lost by their descendants.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, harav et riveinu v'hadan et dineinu v'hanokem et nigmatenu, v'hamashalem gemul achol oivei nafshanu, v'hanifra lanu mitzareinu. Baruch atah Adonai, hanifra le'amo Yisrael, mikol sarehem ha'el ha'Moshiach. Deserving of praise are you, O Lord our God, ruler over the universe, who acts on our behalf, judges our cause, and avenges our wrong, who renders retribution to our mortal enemies and punishes our adversaries. Deserving of praise are you, O Lord, who on behalf of your people Israel judges all their adversaries, O God, the Savior.
One of the other traditions associated with the reading of the scroll is I'm not quite sure what to call it. I guess it's sort of a poem that's recited after the reading. And it helps focus our attention, and I want to just do a small portion of it, the last portion of it. It reads, "The rose of Jacob was cheerful and glad, when they jointly saw Mordecai robed in royal blue. You have been their eternal salvation, O Lord, and their hope throughout generations, to make known that all who hope in you will not be ashamed, nor ever be humiliated, those taking refuge in you. Cursed be Haman, who sought to destroy me. Blessed be Mordecai, the Jew. Blessed be Esther, who sacrificed for me. Here's a name you will not recognize, but he's in the story. And Harvona, too, be remembered for good. Quick word about Harvona. Harvona was one of the king's attendees. And he's the one who pointed out that Haman had erected the gallows for Mordecai, and that because of what Haman had planned to do, it would be appropriate for Haman to find himself on the very gallows he erected. Notice that this is a blessing that is said in gratitude that we express for one who is not a Jew. In other words, this package is not only for Jews, but for those who stand with us as part of the larger community of God. We've heard God's words. We've heard the Megillah. We've heard the Sefer Torah. These are words that should change our lives. And that is our anticipation as we now respond. On pages 96 and 97, with that chayim, it's a tree of life that's intended to take root in us, thereby changing and transforming our lives. Pages 96 and 97 is that response.
Es Chaimi lama chazikim ba veton keha meushar teracheha darkei noam vechol tivoteha shalom Hashivenu Adonai Elecha Ve'nashuva Kadesh Yameinu Kadesh Yameinu Kekedem Hashivenu Adonai Elecha Ve'nashuva Kadesh Yameinu Kadesh Yameinu Kekedem. A tree of life it is to those who take hold of it, and happy are those who support it. Its ways are ways of pleasantness, and all its paths are of peace. Turn us, Lord, to you, and let us return. Renew our days as of old.
And now we have the opportunity, as the priests of old got to stand before God in his presence, we do as well as his priests now, having been clothed in his righteousness. And we respond on pages 98 and 99 with Uvnu Ko. No more.
Uvnu Ko Yomam, Shuva, Adonai Ribavot Alfei Yisrael. When the ark rested, Moses would say, Return, O Lord, to the myriads of Israel's family. Arise, O Lord, to your resting place, you and your mighty ark. Clothe your priests with righteousness. May those who have experienced your faithful love shout for joy. For the sake of your servant David, don't delay the return of your Messiah. Ba'or David Adek, Al Tashev Penei Mishikar. Ki bekach tov, narati lachem, torati al ta'azotu. I give you good instruction. Do not forsake my Torah.
And now as we greet one another up here, and we invite you to greet one another nearby. Okay. Enough hugging and breathing.
Oh.
Yeah, it's Purim, so he disappeared, and it's Purim, so he has to plug in his own light to make it work. What happens around it? Well, again, remember you were reminded it's the kind of thing that does take place on Purim, so it goes. If you look at the inside of the bulletin, once again, you'll see that the title of this particular drash is "A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Gallows." And yeah, that sort of describes the kind of situation that Purim is supposed to provide the atmosphere for. Or if you want to have an alternate title, like our good friends Rocky and Bullwinkle, it's an upside down world. And that it is as well. Now, today was Purim in Jerusalem. And so it was appropriate for us to bring in this particular evening in that fashion. It's a festival that's commanded by the book of Esther. But this particular biblical holiday, as you come to know it, is one of the strangest of all the biblical holidays. All kinds of different things happen. Some of the kinds of things are, one of the traditions is that you wear costumes, but men wear women's costumes, women wear men's costumes. There's all kinds of raucousness, raucacity, pick a term. Raucacity would work on this particular evening, this particular holiday. That takes place. And it's a holiday that also celebrates the miraculous victory of the Jewish people in the Persian Empire over their enemies, those who wanted to annihilate them simply because they're Jews. You see, it was Haman's hate for the Jews that was a major motivation for the abuse of his power that we read about in this book. By the way, as it was for his ancestors, but that's a different story. There are lots of stories that could come from this particular holiday in the reading in the book of Esther. Yet amazingly, that book which describes this miraculous victory, that book does not mention God at all. Oh, by the way, scholars are able to identify Ahasuerus or Ahasuerus. Sometimes they simply shorten the name to Xerxes. So that I pronounce it correctly, I'm going to stick with Xerxes for the rest of this evening, if it's okay with you. But what it tells us is this particular story has to do with history. It is something that actually took place, and we can fix it in history. And for those of you who were able to profit from Dr. Patrice's course this past Tuesday night, she was talking about Esther. And Esther slots in between Zerubbabel. Don't Google Zerubbabel now to find out who he was. And Ezra and Nehemiah. But by this far into this drash, you should be saying, whoa, slow down, Rabbi, wait a minute. Didn't you say God is not mentioned in the book, in the Megillah? Not mentioned at all? Questions. The scroll of Esther raises so many questions. That's just one of them. Why does the name of God not appear at all in the whole Megillah, especially when it's so prominent throughout the rest of the Bible? And why do we usually, not this year because it's a leap year, why do we usually read the portion called Titisah at this time of year? It's the story of the golden calf. It's the story of Moses also going up to the mountain a second time, in a sense, to see God. It raises the question. So is the incident of the golden calf the reason why God didn't show up to celebrate that first Purim? And while we're asking questions, we should ask, so where in the world is Carmen Sandiego? And while we're asking those kind of questions, you should by now expect this next one. Where's Waldo? Now, seriously, where's God when we need him? After all, the Persians are about to annihilate all the Jews in their reach, and by the way, all the Jews in their reach because they were part of the Persian Empire, were all the Jews in the world. Just so you don't misunderstand the impact of this story. You'd think it might just be a real good time for God to show up. No. The whole world seems to be upside down. And it appears that we are living in the upside down. Some of you will get that illusion, some of you won't, but that's okay. But God's nowhere to be found. Well, to start with, the book of Esther emphasizes that God is real and that his purposes will occur even though he may be hidden from sight. And often we can't easily trace his activity in those times. Yes, the book of Esther does not mention, not even once does it mention God. And yet his sovereignty over and his faithfulness to his people are very clear. The scroll, the Megillah, that's behind me, clearly shows evil rising up against God's stated purposes regarding his people. And the evil is defeated in a last-minute coming together, that's all one word, hyphenated, in a last-minute coming together of incredible events and crazy mixed-up circumstances. The kinds of stuff that needs someone to cause it all to happen. No coincidence could have brought these events together as they unfold in this book. You've got a Jewish girl winning the pagan royal beauty pageant. Then you have the king's great love for her. You have Mordecai being at the right place at just the right time to hear the plot against the king's life. Then you have Esther's life and death gamble with the royal Persian law, a gamble that pays off. And then you have the last-minute canceling of the genocide against the Jewish people, the last-ditch attempt of Haman to beg from Esther mercy, which, by the way, that action was actually what helped lead to his hanging. There are just too many events that perfectly unfold and at the right time and place. It hints at a divine plan that just begs to be discovered as a person reads through the book, and the book is put together almost humorously. Everything seems upside down or gets turned upside down as you go through the book. We may not see God at all, but oh, is he ever there? He's there to save Israel at the very last minute. When we read the book of Esther, it is evident that there is a directing power behind every event in the book. Every detail is connected to the detail before it and influences the events after them in this ongoing and intriguing story. Every action of any of the players directly leads to the results that follow. And in the end, just when everything looks hopeless and lost, and the Jews are about to be exterminated from the whole of the Persian Empire, the tables turn. Everything gets turned upside down. And the Jews are saved, and the enemies fall. Haman himself and all of his family are hung on the very gallows that he had specifically prepared for Mordecai. By the way, in case you missed it, he is called the Jew. That emphasizes the reason for why all this is taking place. Simply because he was a Jew. And of course, that has never occurred in history, right? Well, anyhow, we'll stick to this particular story. Now, of course, the heroine of the story is Queen Esther, or in Hebrew, Hadassah. Now, it's an interesting part of the story that Esther was hiding her Jewish identity. Why is that interesting? Because the term Esther is related to the Hebrew term astir, which means just that, hide or hidden. So lying below the surface is that as well. She's hiding her Jewish identity. She's living in the palace of the king with her identity hidden. She becomes the king's most beloved queen. Now look, in all fairness to Haman, he did not know that inside the palace, and in fact in the king's very bedroom, was a Jewish queen. Only at the decisive hour, just before the Jews that he hated, were about to be exterminated throughout the whole empire, just then does Esther reveal who she is. As she reveals to the king her origin and asks for the king's cancellation of the royal decree against her own people. Talk about twists and turns. And for Haman, to build on another cultural reference, what a series of unfortunate events. Thank you for those of you who are current with such things. It helps as we go on. It's like some wild and crazy fairy tale that works out in a very upside-down world. And you know, several years ago, Jack experienced something quite similar. Now, Jack was 72 years old, which makes him about 20 years older than me. And he just loved to thank you. And he just loved to fish. So he was sitting in his boat one day when he heard a voice say, "Pick me up." He looked around, couldn't see anyone. So he thought he was dreaming until he heard the voice say again, "Pick me up." So he looked in the water, and there, floating on the top, was a frog. Now, naturally, Jack asked, "You talking to me?" The frog said, "Yes, of course I'm talking to you. There's nobody else out here in the lake. Pick me up and kiss me, and I'll turn into the most beautiful woman you have seen, and I'll be your bride." At this, Jack looked at the frog. He reached over, picked it up very carefully, and put it in his shirt pocket. At which point the frog said, "Are you nuts? Didn't you hear what I said? I said, kiss me and I will be your beautiful bride." So slowly Jack opens his pocket, looks at the frog, and he says, "Nah, at my age I'd rather have a talking frog." Hey, it's Purim. It's a real twist. What did you expect? Now, Purim represents a clear biblical theme of sudden reversal, when God suddenly turns everything upside down. Some of my favorite authors were deeply engaged in what has come to be known as eucatastrophe. I'm talking particularly of Tolkien, but also of C.S. Lewis. Eucatastrophe, something of catastrophic dimensions that turns out to be good, hence we coined the term eucatastrophe. That's what's going on here. Now, I might also point out that some people, as we're looking at this story, have suggested that the only difference between a tragedy and a comedy is the ending. Well, then, the book of Esther is written in somewhat of a classic style of a comedy. The whole tragedy is turned upside down. Everything is turned on its head. Haman is hanged on the enormous gallows that he himself built. There's a remedy for you. The Jewish people are saved from the Persians, while thousands of Persians convert to Judaism and become Jewish people. And a Jewish girl becomes the queen of what is now, ready, modern-day Iran. Talk about irony? The irony of the book should be clearly evident. The events of the Megillah take place in a truly upside-down world. And yet our sages indicate that this is just what it will be like with the coming of Messiah. It will be a sudden reversal. In their words, when Mashiach comes, he will come in an instant, and things will be turned upside down in a second, just like Purim, when their sorrow was turned into joy and their mourning into a day of celebration. Quick aside, as you know, I've looked at this passage before. Obviously, Purim comes around about once a year. And as I was looking at it, it's the first time that particular phrasing made me reflect on something that another rabbi said in 1 Thessalonians 4. Where your mourning or your sorrow is literally turned into joy and celebration. It's when suddenly the Messiah comes, the shofar sounded, and those of us who remain are transformed. Anyhow, that's an aside. And speaking, or getting back to the idea of reversals and unexpected twists and turns, someone that many of you know, Rabbi Dr. David Friedman, wrote in a newsletter he put out a handful of years ago, and I quote, Dr. Patrice Fisher wrote a brilliant analysis of the book of Esther, comparing it to the closing sections of the book of John, another amazing story in which everything gets suddenly turned upside down. I'm still quoting, if you're interested in obtaining a copy, please contact Menorah Ministries at menorahministries.com, end quote. By the way, those of you who were in the Esther class this past week got a taste of that as well. And the very structure of the scroll itself indicates the same theme. Chapter 4 is a chapter that talks about fasting, in contrast to all the feasting that goes on in this particular book. And in doing so, it prepares the intended victims for their struggle and for their surprise victory in the following chapters. And it sets up the pivot point where everything seems to flip upside down. A very quick walk through the structure of the book, and I do mean very quick. The book begins, very opening verse, with the greatness of Xerxes. The book concludes, in the very last chapter, with the greatness of Xerxes and of Mordecai. Then in chapter 1, you have 2 Persian banquets. In chapter 9, at the end, you have 2 Jewish banquets. In chapter 2, you have Esther accepts Gentile identity. Tough for me to describe it that way. But in chapter 8, you have Gentiles convert to Jewish identity. You follow? Chapter 3, Haman's exalted. Chapter 8, Mordecai's exalted. Chapter 3, you've got the anti-Jewish edict. Chapter 8, you have the pro-Jewish edict. Chapter 4, you've got Mordecai and Esther. Chapter 7, you've got Xerxes and Esther. Chapter 5, you've got the first banquet. Chapter 7, you got the second banquet. And the pivotal point, as you see this structure, and I hope you've listened carefully to the way this is very carefully structured. The pivotal point is the royal procession of Mordecai. And that's the hinge that flips everything. Strikingly put together book. So what are the lessons then of Purim for us today? That's another question, which I'll try to answer briefly. 4 points. 4 lessons. God sometimes allows threats to go almost to the very end before he intervenes and saves the day. His sense of timing, let me remind you, is very different from ours. And even at the last minute, when everything seems to be a total loss, it is still never too late for God to intervene and save the day. So don't give up, and don't stop praying, and don't give up hope even under the most impossible circumstances. As I suggested before, in a non-leap year, this holiday falls far closer to the story of the Exodus. So in light of that, even if you face the sea in front of you and the enemy closing behind you, as Israel did after they left Egypt, God is still sovereign. And in 1 minute, he can reverse the tide of history. Read, see, tide, stick with it. And can save you from your circumstances or your situation. Second, the tools and means that God has in his hand are endless and often unexplainable. When God promises, his promises will become reality, although none of us know the how or the when. What normally happens is that we tend to strain and suffer and stress to try to figure out everything. But in the end, God's plans and promises will become a reality. Third, it's important to do the right thing. Mordecai did a good deed for the king, and it was recorded in the king's books. And after a long time, not right away, after a long time, Mordecai was paid well for the good thing that he had done. Now, we often want to see the rewards immediately, and we want to have recognition and honor and reward for the good that we do now. However, it's wise to realize that God is a just rewarder. Doing the right thing is always right and good, and allowing God to keep the books is the way to make sure that we will receive the reward with him, or pardon me, from him at just the right time. 4, there is another more complicated lesson to be learned from the book of Esther. You see, there may be times when what is done may seem wrong or perhaps even slightly dishonest. Like when Mordecai teaches Esther to hide her identity as a Jew and sends her to the palace of a pagan king. Many people would probably criticize Mordecai and Esther for doing things like this. But God uses these, what we might call gray areas, and turns them around. So, we should be slow, very slow, to judge the deeds and motivations of others and to condemn people before we see the end results of their deeds. Turns out we often are far too quick to judge others, especially when we don't know what's going on behind behind the scenes. In the book of Esther, God is working behind the scenes. As we read the book of Esther, we are actually watching from the balcony. That's not the best vantage point, as it turns out. Which brings me back to the original question concerning Esther. God, where are you? Well, as it turns out, and I've mentioned this before, but some of you may not have had the opportunity to hear it on previous occasions. The name of God does appear hidden in the book of Esther. Remember? Esther, Astir, hidden. There are 5 places in the book where God's name appears acrostically. 4 places in which the word Yod-He, Vav-He, the letters for the name of God, is formed by 4 Hebrew letters appearing in consecutive words. Another acrostic contains the phrase Eyah. It's the phrase that you find when God speaks to Moses in the burning bush. It's the phrase that is the equivalent of what would be read in non-leap years at this time, when God says to Moses before he climbs the mountain the second time, I will go with you, and I will give you rest. Eyah is the core of that. These hidden references to God indicate God's secret activity. And then, as it turns out, if you look at that scroll, each column of the Megillah, except for the first one, each column starts with HaMelech. Translation?
King.
The king. The king. Not the guy who shows up here, but the one behind the scenes. In other words, God is seen as sovereign, even though he is not seen. Even though there is no express reference to God in Esther, he is clearly and pervasively present. His apparent absence tells us that he works even when he's not recognized. So, through the natural course of human events and human actions, God providentially preserves his people. He does it without a miraculous intervention or a big dramatic display accompanied by fireworks or whatever else. He works behind the scenes, quietly, through people who are willing to be worked through, without violating our freedom of choice. And that's a pattern for the way in which God works throughout history. And as such, perhaps this is even hinted at by the usual partial portion for this week. Moses was not allowed to see God's face. God hides it. But Moses gets to enter into a life-changing glimpse of God's reality in Exodus 33 and 34. Oh, by the way, it's at that time that God reveals his characteristics, his attributes, as a confirmation of his promise that he will be always present with his people. While the book of Esther affirms that the God who appears hidden nevertheless remains present, it also clearly emphasizes that the survival of the Jewish people depends on the actions of individuals willing to take decisive steps on behalf of others, even at great personal risk. To reinforce that, I want to close with a poem. It's a parody of a far more familiar poem, but this parody expresses it well. I've shared this with you before, but that's okay. It's appropriate here, so I share it with you again. One night, I had a wondrous dream. One set of footprints there was seen. The footprints of my precious Lord. But mine were not along the shore. But then some stranger prints appeared, and I asked the Lord, what have we here? These prints are large and round and neat, but Lord, they are too big for feet. My child, he said in somber tone, for miles I carried you alone. I challenged you to walk in faith, but you refused and made me wait. You disobeyed, you would not grow. The walk of faith you would not know. So I got tired and got fed up, and there I dropped you on your butt. Because in life there comes a time when one must fight and one must climb, when one must rise and take a stand, or leave their butt prints in the sand. Kindly, don't leave any butt prints behind. It's your choice, as it was for the people in the book of Esther. Take the next minute or so with quiet response and reflection, please. In one sense, we may be living in the upside down, but it will get turned to right. The topsy-turvy world will. It's a time when the world will be perfected under the rule of the Lord Almighty. The Elaine who anticipates that, looks forward to that, as we too anticipate that time. But please note that there's a key phrase in there that I remind you of from time to time. It has to do with our calling being our task. If you're ready to take on that calling as your task, it's appropriate to bow. If not, I wouldn't suggest you bow. It would be hypocritical. But at this point, please stand. Join us on pages 102 to 107 as we respond, as we anticipate this time in the future.
Shelo sanu kagoy haratzot, velo samanu k'mishpachot ha'adama. Shelo samkalkeinu kahem, vegor aleinu kekal hamonam. Ve'anachnu kori, u'mishtachavim u'modim, lifnei melech malkei amlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Shehu notei shamayim ve'yoseh haaretz, u'moshad mikaro b'shamayim mima'al, ushkinatu zo, v'gavei meromim, u'Eloheinu Eod, emet malkeinu efesulato, כתוב בתורתו, וידעת היום, והשארתה אל לבביך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל, ועל הארץ מתחת עינו. It is incumbent upon us to praise the Master of all, to exalt the Creator of the world, for he has made us distinct from the nations and unique among the families of the earth. Our destiny is not like theirs, our calling is our task. We bow down and acknowledge before the King of Kings that there is none like him. For he stretched forth the heavens like a tent, and established the earth. Truly there is none like our Lord and King. As the Lord says, you shall know this day and reflect in your heart that it is the Lord who is God in the heavens above, and on the earth beneath there is none else. We hope, O Lord our God, to soon behold your majestic glory, when all abominations shall be removed, and all false gods shall be at an end. Then shall the world be perfected under the rule of the Lord Almighty, and all mankind shall call upon your name. For to you every knee must bow, and every tongue declare that you are God. Reign over us soon and forever. May the kingdom of David's greatest Son be established forever. For then shall the words be fulfilled. The Lord shall be king forever, and the Lord shall be king over all the earth. On that day the Lord shall be one, and his name one.
You may be seated. Except for our good friend Gary. And I put you into his hands. But